All right, I got it powered up. I've got it charged with water. Charged. It's a term we used in the fire department back in the day. So it is fully functional now, and I don't have to worry about any leaks. I turned it on, I think about probably an hour. Yeah, a little hour passed while I was doing other things, including get this liner ready. I'm gonna try the best I can. I don't know the angle is gonna be right. I have a GoPro sitting on my head, and I can't see what you can see until I actually upload the video or edit the video, as it were. So I'm gonna do the best I can. Hopefully you get something from this. This is one of the things that throw people a lot because of the folds and all that stuff, and it's very, very easy to make this happen. Let me back up. So there's a lot of people that will talk about putting the excess pan lighter in the corner in between the studs. Sometimes there's an opening, but more often than not there's not going to be an opening, because as you can see clearly there are studs going that way and studs going that way, and it doesn't do any good. I've never felt good about it, even when, you know, back in the day before I even, I mean, you know, when I was first doing pan liners and I would notice that gap, it's like, you know what, let me shove my liner back in the gap. But then I feel like the liner is going to drop down, and if there's enough room, you know, if there's a ½ an inch or 3/4 of an inch, enough room for a liner to get in, I feel like the mortar could kind of follow. You know, it's just, it never felt right to me. So you could do it, and it would prevent the bump out that we always are going to have. But like I said, 98% of the time there's not going to be a gap there to deal with anyway. So this is how I make it happen on the fold. I always do my fold on the corner, going this direction on the back wall first. That's just by habit the way I go about it, and it doesn't really matter as long as the end result is the same. This one is a little longer than usual. In fact, I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off a good part of this, because this is way, way, way too long of a liner. I usually talk about, you know, no harm, no foul. The larger the liner, the better, because you can always cut back when you're done, but having it this long is making it a little difficult to even set. So I'm just going to get rid of a bunch of this right off the get-go. I should have done this before I put it in. Very, very, very sharp, brand new blade is what you want on your utility knife. It's going to make your life easier doing this liner stuff. And again, I'm not proposing that you have to do a liner. If you can get a tile ready base and go that way without a liner and without mortar, then by all means. They are very pricey, and they're going to go by your measurement when they actually cut one. KBRS is another company, and again, they make custom pans, tileable pans, but they are very pricey, and they're usually about 2 weeks out on getting you your order. And so we generally don't have, well, contractors don't have 2 weeks. You might have 2 weeks to spare, but that is an alternative to doing all of this mess, because I really do get tired of doing this. I thought I had a magnetic tip on this thing. Crud. It's not a magnetic tip. Get a magnetic tip if you're going to do this. Some people like staples. Staples are kind of cheesy to me. They could work if you want to use them. Some people prefer roofing nails, you know, hitting the nails one at a time. Whatever works for you. I've just always screwed it in, and it doesn't really matter which screw you use. It doesn't have to be a particular type of screw. Drywall screws is fine. It's not necessary to put one screw or fastener, if you will. With any particular math, you know, you can see I'm just kind of doing it between the studs, which is fine. You know, because at the end of the day, all you're trying to do is hold the liner up. You're not trying to overkill this portion. There's a lot of liner here too. Yeah, this is a 4-foot width, by the way, and it barely wraps over the curb, which is fine for me. I don't really care about wrapping on the outside of the curb. I used to, but then I realized if I'm shy, it doesn't really matter, because the outside of the curb should never ever see any water anyway. So usually if I have a bigger shower, I can go ahead and put all this extra liner in and it doesn't impede what I'm doing, but this is a very small area I'm dealing with, and that's why I'm taking the time to cut all this excess. Anyway, moving along. When you get to the corner, and one of the reasons people like using that little gap, you know, like this isn't the ideal gap because it's going the wrong direction, but the gap would generally be in the corner, is because of the bump out that you get. Inevitably, you're going to get a bump out of the pan liner because it doubles up on itself. And the correct way to do it is the same way you did it on the other side, right? So the fold is going to go overlapped to the inside, just like you saw me do on the other side. Same way on this side. I could have sworn I had a magnetic top tip on this. This is really inconvenient. Ah! I also apologize for the low light. The light that's above me that controls the shower area also controls the fan. And if I have the fan on with the light, you'll be able to see better, but you won't be able to hear better. This is a bump out I was telling you about. So I usually hit that bump out right on the corner just to flatten it down. Now, having said that, there's still a bump out with that fold, right? The fold's on the inside. And so when the wallboard goes over it, there's maybe a 1/4 inch bump out over here. But it doesn't matter, because as that bump out, as you're screeding out your thin set, this area is going to get a little less thin set, and then you're just going to go hog wild on your thin set over here. And so, you know, you just know that as you're doing the tile. So that bump out's never ever bothered me, ever, not once. Well, all right, it is mortar day. Mortar. I'm gonna go over a lot of stuff here. This is probably the biggest hiccup that a homeowner or DIYer gets involved in. This is one of the fun parts that we tile guys like doing, because we get to play in the mud like when we were kids. But it's also a little bit artistic, you know. There are certain things in here that are just kind of finite. You know, plumbing in the faucet is finite, and scabbing and doing all this other prep work is finite. But the mortar pan, we get to create something. The tile, we get to create something. So this is probably, I'm gonna say, probably the most fun part of our job, if there's gonna be a fun part, because it's very intentional. We don't rush through this, you know. We take our time with it. But there's a lot of information that I want to cover here, and if I get redundant, or if I go backward and skip around all that stuff, pardon me. There's just a lot of stuff to say about this process. This is probably the most daunting thing for a homeowner, a DIYer, to figure out, with pouring a shower pan. Because I got a lot of emails concerning that, you know, like in consultations and stuff like that, concerning why they failed or how do you do it just so, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to go over a lot of things for that purpose, you know, if somebody is contemplating doing it yourself. I have actually come in with a customer before and they're like, you know, just do my shower pan. I can do the rest. I'll do the wallboard and I'll do the tile and all that stuff, but do my shower pan. I'm like, sure, I'll do that. So that like just justifies what I'm talking about, how this is very daunting. Anyway, starting off, I want to go on a little tirade about this dry pack, this notion of a dry pack, that got started probably about 5 years ago. I'm going to guess about 5-6 years ago, people started talking about a dry pack, and I got a couple of things to say about it. One, this is mortar. This is basically, you know, 4 parts sand to 1 part cement, and it's pre-mixed, and that's what I highly suggest you do. If I pour, and I'm not going to do it now, but if I pour water in here to the consistency that I like it, and I clump it in my hand, it will not fall apart like a snowball, like you always see on other videos. If I put less water than I actually want for my purposes, and I clump it, it'll stay together because it's compressed. It will stay together, it won't fall apart. If I put more water than what I desire and I clump it, it's going to stay together because it's compressed. So any amount of water is going to make that compression without it falling apart happen. Arguably, if you put just barely any water, yeah, it might fall apart, but that is a bad, there's no science to that. There's no recipe. Somebody can't tell you, although the bag probably does, you know, how much water, how many, you know, 3 quarts of water per bag or whatever. I don't read the directions. I just, because I know what I want to be able to work it, right? And also mortar is generally going to be used for brick and stuff like that. So the recipe that they're giving you, what they're telling you on the bag, is a lot different than what we're doing with the pan mortar, right? So the pan mortar specifically is what we're using it for. If you're using it on your driveway to, you know, seal cracks, you would want it much richer, you know, more water the better. So depending on the use, that's when the water thing kicks in. And I've told people before, usually on a bag of this, it's about 3 spongefuls of this, right? So one of these type of sponges you get at Home Depot, I just like literally soak it up, and that's about 3 spongefuls. But it might be 3.5, it might be 4. There's nothing I can tell you that's finite, because sometimes this is 1 bag and I might be mixing 2 bags and put in 5 spongefuls, and that's enough. Like, unfortunately I can't tell you. So it's how would I put it? We manipulate things depending on the mortar, and that's another thing, depending on the mortar we're working with, you know. So for example, I tell somebody, oh, I use about 3 spongefuls, but that's on this bag of Sakrete. But if I use Quikrete, it might be 4 spongefuls that I use. So nothing's across the board. So unfortunately I can't tell you that, but I can tell you what it feels like to work. You shouldn't be struggling to get this mortar to do what it wants to do. And on the other end, you shouldn't have water seeping up. As you're about 30 minutes into it, water should not be rising up to the top. There just shouldn't be that much water. So it's somewhere right in between. So I can't really attest to how much water you're going to put in there. You got to kind of feel it. Anyway, getting back to the different types of mortar. This is Sakrete. This is what they sell at Lowe's. And so what happened was, I don't remember when it was, maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. I think I was working in Florida, and I could not, Home Depot was not selling Quikrete, which was kind of odd. They were actually selling Sakrete, or maybe I was at a Lowe's. But anyway, I'm like, let me just get this sand mix. Yeah, that sounds about right. Topping and bedding mortar. When I used it the first time, I absolutely fell in love with it, because I'm using Quikrete by probably 20 years ago, 22, 23 years ago. I've been using Quikrete all this time from Home Depot. And when I started using Sakrete, it's like, ooh, I just fell in love. And I think the reason is the aggregate, which is a sand, is thicker than what the other brand is. And because it's thicker, it just screeds. It does all the things that I want it to do easier than Quikrete does. It's a weird touchy-feely thing that if you do this enough, you kind of understand what I'm talking about, but it just does what I want it to do easier. And so I like it better. In fact, I went to Lowe's specifically for these. Well, I have a 5th bag in the downstairs just in case I need it. Always, oh, that's another thing. Always get more than you think you're going to need, because it would suck to get through this and then have to stop for an hour and go to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever and go get some more. So always get more than you think, because it's easier to bring a bag back than it is to go get one. Anyway, I stopped at Home Depot to get all my other materials, but I stopped at Lowe's specifically for this, for Sakrete Sand Mix, because I like it better. There's a couple other brands out there. I can't remember. If I remember, I'll put it in the description area. But there's a couple other brands that I like also, but they're usually specific to tile stores and stuff like that. But basically, this is my go-to product when I'm doing a shower pan. Anyway, getting on, and here are my tools. This is basically all I need. You know, like a 9-inch blade. Is that 9 or 12? It might be 14. 14-inch blade, and then my trowel. I have a margin trowel and a little 9-inch taping blade and all that stuff. And I just make the tools do what I want them to do. So don't get fixated, oh, I don't have the right tool. Anything's a tool. Anything is a tool, as long as, you know, the end result's the same. That's just me. You're gonna need a couple levels, obviously. You're gonna need a longer level, you know, like a 4-foot or 5-foot level, you know, to go across this direction. You're gonna need a smaller one to go this direction, although this one isn't quite small enough, but this is still useful for me. And a couple of smaller levels if you want. I've got a torpedo level here for the drain, so I can manipulate the drain as I do my final screed of my mortar to make sure my drain is, yeah. So you're gonna need all of that. I have an old-timey level, which is not used as a level anymore. It's used as a screed board, right? So when I'm screeding my mortar, this is what I'm using, right? So my mortar is inside the pan, and I'm just moving it back and forth to make sure, you know, that I'm flat, right? You're not trying to get level, you're trying to get flat. So that's what that's used for. Screed boards can be anything you want them to be. I've got this 1x that I usually use as a ledger board on my wall, but that could be a screed board as well. And this one's longer, and you can cut off the end of it, and you can get a wide sweep of all your mortar, the surface of your mortar, to screed off to get it flat. So that's that. That's basically what my tool section is. And then of course gloves. You want to wear gloves because mortar's not good on your skin. Insofar as pouring the mortar, and it's kind of a misnomer, we don't pour mortar, we just scoop it in here. And it generally, this is just shy of 3 foot. I think it's 32 inches or something like that, but I'm going to call it 3x5. Tub shower conversion is typically 3x5. It's how much tile I'm going to get anyway. So generally speaking, I get away with 4 bags and a 5th one just in case I need it. The drain barrel goes up. I unscrew the drain barrel about 1.5 inches or so, and so if you do the 1/4 inch per foot, which is not finite, like you can make it more if you want to, but a 1/4 inch per foot is what we're trying to get. So if I'm 1.5 inches here, now would be about 2.5 inches over here. I've got about 3 foot, 2.5, my math is horrible, 3 3.25 is going to be down at the end, right? So 3.25 would be your perimeter, your furthest spot. And in this case, my drain is in center, so this is definitely my furthest spot. So you're going to be 3 inches. And we're just going to call that 3 inches all the way around. You know, I cut this board just for demo purposes. So if you want it, there's different ways to do mortar pan. It's very convoluted, and that's why I'm kind of going back and forth and all that stuff. When you do a mortar pan, there's what we call a perimeter screed. And basically what the perimeter screed is you're putting all your mortar, and I'm not going to demonstrate it because it's going to take time and all that stuff, and I don't have a cameraman. But the perimeter screed is you're getting 3 inches of mortar, or 2.5, or however much you need, all the way around the perimeter, and you're packing it down, probably about 3-4 inches outside of here, right? So imagine this is a mortar, and you're just putting mortar at the perimeter all the way around, all the way around, all the way around. You're putting a level on it constantly and packing it down, all that stuff, until you have all four sides the exact same height and they're all level. Now going forward, you just throw in the rest of your mortar and follow off of that screed, follow off of this screed all the way down to your drain, and now your slope is perfect. That's called a perimeter screed. I don't do that. I've done it a couple times. I don't find it easier, I don't find it faster, but you might. There's also, I don't know that there's a name for it, basically a screed board. I'm going to call it a screed board because I don't know there's a name for it, but you would get some 1x, right, and you would cut it down and make sure that it's all the same thickness. In this case, I think it's 3 inches, and you would have enough to cover this whole area. One piece of 1x going across here that's 3 inches, one piece of 1x that's 3 inches all the way around, and you would set it up against the shower pan liner just like that, and then you would throw your mortar in there and you would screed off of this board all the way around. Your mortar would be packed up to the top of this, and then from that point you can screed down, same as we did where I told you about using the mortar. In this case, you're using something that's fixated, you know, that would be, and it doesn't have to be plywood or 1x2. You know, I've seen people do it with foam board before. But what I feel the mistake is that they leave the foam board encapsulated in it, and I don't like that idea because that's the weak spot, and you don't want a weak spot in your mortar pan. So I don't believe in that, but some people do it. Now, the only bad thing about using wood is if you use a screed board to, you know, come off of this the way I explained all the way around, in about an hour and a half, 2 hours or so, you have to come back and pull the boards out. You have to leave enough time for that mortar to set up a little bit and pull all those boards out, and then fill in the gap all the way around and make it, you know, monolithic mortar, rather than have the, don't put the boards in there, leave them there. Even with the foam boards, I don't recommend doing foam boards. That's the other way. And then the third way is, you know, playing it by ear or eye, and that's the way I do it. And so again, I'm not going to show it. If I have a video on how to do that, I might post it up there somewhere in the cards section, and you can go watch that. Is it going to be right? Yeah, I think it's going to be right up there. So yeah, I'm not going to show it. I might show the beginning phases of it, but basically what I'm doing is I'm mixing up this bag, I'm scooping, throwing it in there, I'm mixing up the next bag, scooping, throwing it up in there, you know, all 4 bags. And then I'm, with my hands, I'm literally pushing the mortar around and pushing it around, using my level to check level and all that stuff, and packing it down, and I just kind of, and then I start screeding off the excess and all that stuff, and I kind of play it by ear. Sometimes I'll get a Sharpie, and this is an idea also, which some people do. Imagine that was a 2x4, piece of 2x4, something like that, and you can get your Sharpie, and it's usually better not a black one. If you can get a different color one, and just run your Sharpie along this board up against your pan liner, right, all the way around. Now you have something to gauge where your mortar is going to go up to, and you could probably use these lines on this pan liner, but then you're going to lose them over here. So Sharpie usually works better, and just follow this Sharpie all the way around all 4 sides, and that's going to be your parameter. That's where your mortar is going to top off at. So yeah, it's a lot of talk. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to bore anybody, but there's a lot to say about this that I can't possibly go through. You know, again, I don't have a cameraman, I don't have enough battery life to go through this whole process for 45 minutes to an hour and all that stuff. I might show a little bit of it, but basically that's the way I do it. So all those different ways, and you might have a 4th or a 5th way that you prefer, which is fine, because the end result is you want it packed down solid, and you want to make sure that it's flat and that it's sloped. That's your main goal, and that all the perimeter is level. That's your main goal, however you make that happen. Let me also talk about the dry pack. The way I started, I want to end it that way. The dry pack has to do specifically with a water in, water out system. So imagine we were not waterproofing the surface of our pan, which we are now. And the way we used to do it would be water goes in, it goes into the weep holes and goes down to the drain. A dry pack, because it's not compressed the way that a wetter mortar pan would be, and then it's not, you know, you're tamping it down and all that stuff. A dry pack is much easier for water to filtrate through that sand particles and all that stuff down to the weep holes. And that's why specifically people advocate for a dry pack. But you don't have to worry about that mantra of the dry pack anymore, because we're waterproofing the surface. All you're trying to do is get a pan that forces water to the drain. So even if you got a foam pan, same end result. However you make it happen to force that water from the tile on the surface down to the drain, that's the whole point of a mortar pan. Now, has nothing to do with water in, water out, and dry pack, and yada yada yada. It has nothing to do with that anymore. So I just want to put that out there. Anyway, I'm going to get started, and I might come back at a couple of points during this process. Hey, if you enjoyed that video and you learned something, consider being a Patreon member. $5, $10, $15 a month would help me greatly produce more videos. I make nothing from YouTube at all. If you're going to call me for advice, please donate $50 for 30 minutes. My link to my PayPal and my Patreon account is down below. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get immediate notifications as soon as I post videos. And thank you very much for your support.